all the distinguished guests who are present here. I'm extremely delighted to be here this evening to participate in this event. Incidentally, this is perhaps the first event that I am taking part, not only in Mumbai, but anywhere after becoming the Governor Reserve Bank of India. When I assumed charge, I thought initially for a few months, 3-4 months, it's better to avoid events, including one-to-one, one-on-one interviews with the media, whether the print media or the electronic media, because you participate in one function or give one interview, then you are under immense pressure to say no to others. And considering the pressure on your time, it was difficult. But when I got the information that Dr. Reddy, Dr. YV Reddy, a book co-authored by Dr. YV Reddy is being released, obviously I could not say no, and I could not have said no. So thank you very much, sir, for considering me to be sort of the chief guest to launch this book. And as I said, I am extremely honored to be invited for launch of this book, Indian Fiscal Federalism, authored by Dr. YV Reddy and Sri GR Reddy. This is the latest in a prolific body of work that draws from Dr. Reddy's hands-on experience with the Indian economy and public policy. These insightful expositions are interwoven with glimpses of Dr. Reddy's professional life and his insider views. Sri GR Reddy has worked in the Indian Economic Service and obviously has a lot of experience. For me, having worked as Secretary Economic Affairs, I do know the kind of contribution which the officers from the Indian Economic Service make to the policy making at the highest level in Government of India. So I take this opportunity and to congratulate Dr. YV Reddy and Sri GR Reddy for having taken this initiative and written this book on a theme which has become very important in the overall fiscal history of India. A few words about Dr. Reddy. The more I am in Reserve Bank of India participating in various internal discussions before any policy making or before taking any new initiative, and I had the occasion to mention it to Dr. Reddy today afternoon also when we met, that any discussion or any internal deliberation which goes on, some instance, some experience which our officers in Reserve Bank had during his tenure in a meeting or in a discussion or in an interaction with him, such incidences, I mean, people fondly remember you, sir, and they do sort of recollect and mention that in this situation, Dr. Reddy had taken this kind of a decision. So those anecdotes and precedents, they always come up, and I value them very much. As Governor of the Reserve Bank of India during 2003 to 2008, after his stint as the Deputy Governor during the period 1996 to 2002, Dr. Reddy's journey was studded with many milestones. His tenure as Governor can be best characterized by the words he himself used on assuming the office of the Governor in September 2003 to describe what his approach would be. He had said, "Continuity and change will be mixed together appropriately." Of course, it will be remiss of me if I do not mention the response of Dr. Bimal Jalan, the outgoing governor, who said, "Dr. Reddy will change whatever I did and will continue where he left off as a deputy governor." For a central bank, proactive action is of immense importance. When risks were brewing in pre-2008 period, Dr. Reddy sensed them preemptively. Drawing from his speeches, the word overheating entered the lexicon of monetary policy in India. During the buildup of financial excesses in advanced economies with possible knock-on effects on bystanders like India, he resolutely set about preparing India's defenses, building investment fluctuation reserves in the banking system, recalibrating risk weights for vulnerable asset classes, and setting prudential limits on interbank liabilities. In short, when the world was behaving in a pro-cyclical manner, Dr. Reddy had turned counter-cyclical ahead of the curve. As events later showed, these bulwarks became critical in protecting the Indian economy from the ravages of the global financial crisis of 2008-2009. I have personally been an avid follower of Dr. Reddy's work. Having myself worked for several years on fiscal and economic issues, both at national and subnational levels, I am emboldened by the occasion provided by the theme of the book that is being launched today to share some of my own thoughts on the issue of fiscal federalism in India. From a fiscal perspective, India's federal system has three important components. First, Article 1 of the Constitution of India states that India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Second, the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India allocates subjects to the states and the union under different lists, and it also contains certain overlapping functions in the concurrent list. Third, Article 280 of the Constitution mandates formation of Finance Commission every 5 years to recommend vertical and horizontal devolution of net central taxes and various other grants. Now, there are other provisions in the Constitution which are relevant for Indian fiscal federalism, but I picked up on these three specific provisions because they are absolutely important in the context of fiscal federalism. When we emphasize on the fiscal part of federalism, these are the three important components. There are others also. But essentially, the way Indian fiscal system, the center-state fiscal relations, they function, these are broadly determined by these three provisions. And over the years, thinkers and experts and policymakers have taken different view on each of these three provisions in the Constitution. Now, over the past decades, as I mentioned, the actual working of these constitutional provisions have generated considerable debate. Successive finance commissions have made efforts to address the emerging issues and challenges. But in a vibrant democracy like India, the debate goes on. Geopolitical necessities, geopolitical risks have necessitated higher expenditure on defense and internal security. Natural calamities and disasters have added a new dimension to our expenditure, both at the central and state level. And they have required a lot of expenditure from budgets of both the central and state governments. In parallel, aspirations of the people and the country as a whole have required that government spends more on development programs. The interplay between such developments in the real economy and the certain features embedded in our Constitution have thrown up issues which need to be addressed. I would like to highlight some of these issues. While doing so, I must hasten to stress that the points I am bringing out do not, I repeat, they do not represent the deliberations or the direction of thinking of the 15th Finance Commission, where I functioned as a member for more than 1 year. I would like to mention 5 points in this regard. And I was, once I was invited to this function, and these are the points which have been sort of in my mind for quite some time. So I have listed out 5 points, broadly covering the institutional framework and the operational framework in which our center-state fiscal relations, they work, and in the context of the idea of fiscal federalism in India. The 5 points are as follows. First, over the past several decades, different finance commissions have adopted different approaches with regard to principle of tax devolution, grants to be given to states, and fiscal consolidation issues. If you look back from first Finance Commission onwards, we need not even go so much far back in history, but if you look at the last 4 or 5 Finance Commissions, every Finance Commission has taken a different approach with regard to the principle of devolution, of the vertical devolution between center and states, and the horizontal devolution among the states. Similarly, on the idea of giving grants, revenue deficit grants and other grants, finance commissions have taken different approaches. On the issue of the fiscal consolidation also, different finance commissions have given different weightages. While at one level, there has to be a framework for fresh and innovative thinking by every finance commission, at another level, there is need to ensure broad consistency between finance commissions so that there is some degree of certainty in the flow of funds, especially to the states. This has become even more critical in the post-GST scenario. In other words, there has to be continuity and change between finance commissions. Increasingly, therefore, it is felt that there is a need to give permanent status to the Finance Commission. The Commission can function as a leaner entity in the intervening period till the next Finance Commission is set up in a full-fledged manner. During the intervening period, among other things, such an entity can also address issues arising from implementation of the recommendations of the Finance Commission. The second point I would like to highlight is that the principle of decentralization works better when powers and functions are delegated based on which tier of governance is best suited to fulfill that responsibility. The Constitution has already provided for delegation of certain functions to urban and rural local bodies, but it is seen that there is still a good distance to traverse when it comes to devolution of funds to these local bodies. It is therefore essential that state finance commissions are constituted every 5 years as per the mandate given under Article 243I of the Constitution of India, and arrangements are made for their robust functioning. It's interesting to note that although the provision under Article 243I is identical to the provision under Article 280, its implementation has fallen short. There could be reasons for the same, but they need to be addressed on priority. The third point I would like to highlight is that recent initiatives in fostering cooperative federalism have opened new chapters of cooperation between center and states. The GST Council is functioning on the principle of shared sovereignty. As Dr. YV Reddy and Sri GR Reddy point out in their book, the sacrifice of fiscal autonomy at both levels of government in favor of the GST Council needs to be seen as a trade-off so as to reap the benefit of tax harmonization. Indeed, the Indian model of GST preserves the essence of Indian federalism. India is, however, a union of states in which both the union and the states have to be fiscally strong. While this issue has to be addressed by Finance Commission, the challenge for the GST Council now is to realize the full potential of GST for enhancing the tax to GDP ratio under GST and work on other areas of our economy to enhance the overall competitiveness of the Indian economy. For instance, can the GST Council expand its scope and agree to work on other areas of reforms to generate national consensus on certain reforms which requires cooperation across the political spectrum and cooperation between the center and the states and among the states themselves. The fourth point that I would like to highlight is that cooperative federalism should not, however, breed inertia. Alongside cooperative federalism, there has to be competitive federalism. The ranking of states on the parameter of ease of doing business has generated very healthy competition among the states. Indices developed by the Niti Aayog on health, water management, implementation of SDGs, etc., have the potential to generate similar healthy competition. The program of aspirational districts is another such model for competition and development. The fifth and the last point I would like to highlight is that there is now general agreement in the country about the importance of fiscal consolidation roadmap, both at national and subnational levels. While adhering to fiscal deficit targets and debt to GDP ratios, it is equally important to undertake robust expenditure planning based on a commonly agreed expenditure code to address the socio-economic challenges without diluting the goals of fiscal consolidation. These are some of the thoughts which come to my mind while participating in this event today. Steps like these will perhaps go a long way in strengthening fiscal federalism and the overall fiscal robustness of our economy. I am sure the book authored by Dr. YV Reddy and Sri GR Reddy will generate substantive debate and contribute to our understanding of issues connected with fiscal federalism. I congratulate Dr. YV Reddy and Sri GR Reddy on their new book and thank them and the organizers of today's event for giving me this opportunity to be present here. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Das, for your address. And now I'm going to invite the rest of the panel to join Dr. Reddy on stage. Ranjan, will you lead everybody up?
It's an absolute pleasure to have Dr. Reddy back in Mumbai, and especially for people like me. He's, in the 12 years he was here at the Reserve Bank, he mentored so many of us, guided us. And I was telling him some time ago that this is the 6th book which you have autographed for me. He used to, sometimes also if he liked something we wrote, he would gift books, not just written by him but by others. So it's a pleasure to have you here. But I want to start with Dr. GR Reddy. So what is the genesis of this book? Why did you decide to do this book on fiscal federalism?
Good evening, everyone. Actually, this happened, accidentally happened to meet each other at a conference and we called me aside. Then asked GR why not we write a book on fiscal federalism. But I think that was his idea. Okay. So normally when someone is asked to introduce a book, I think we talk about what is contained in the book, what has provoked the writers to take up this project. But I think I seek the indulgence of the distinguished audience here to differ from the standard practice. Instead, I want to share my experience of being a co-author. So I want to leave the difficult task of what really prompted us to write the book to my lead author, Dr. YV Reddy sir. So when he asked me, all of a sudden I was taken aback. I said, okay, you could have written the book on his own. Why the hell did it require my assistance? Then I said, sir, I will assist you in whatever manner you want me to. And then I expressed my own reservations whether I can stand up to his expectations. He said, GR, I mean, you are being very modest, and said, no, I'm not going to take your assistance unless you agree to be my co-author. And so he put his foot down. He was my guru, my boss, and then we worked. He was reporting to him in the Ministry of Finance as well as in the government of AP. So once a sir, always a sir in the government. So I said I couldn't muster enough courage to say no to him. So that's how our association started. Then we started deliberating on what to write and what not to write. And then, so we initially started, listed out something like 20 chapters. So later on, we brought them down further. So that's how we started. I think it was so meticulous. I think it was a daily learning experience for me, in the sense that sometimes he called me up in the 5 in the morning. I think he gets up very early. I mean, so he says that is the time, very productive time, when he gets fresh ideas. He said, last night I got an idea, at 12 in the night, and they said I wanted to share it with you this morning. So that's how it was a daily. We used to change the drafts quite often, and then he will not be satisfied unless he gets into nitty-gritty of each and everything, and he gets into the minutest detail. And then when we were halfway through the book, then he said one day, he called me, GR, why the hell are we writing this book? I was totally taken aback. I said, sir, we have done so much of work. We have almost finished 17 chapters or so. Then I tried to convince him that, okay, these are the new developments that we are trying to cover in the book, I think, which have not been covered so far. Then he wasn't convinced. I said, let's seek the advice of some friends and then experts in the subjects. So obviously referred it to some subjects, and then they reassured us that what we were trying to do was on the right track. Then we resumed our work after being reassured by the experts. Then it was I was working full-time for the government of Telangana. It was a little difficult, so I used to work on Saturdays and Sundays, and then maybe mornings. He's such at this age, he keeps working so much. No. I'm not trying to, I'm not saying anything, I'm not used to exaggerating things, Then actually, he was stickler to the timings. We had given a timeline to the Oxford University Press that I think, if I remember correctly, it was in November. And he was down with viral fever. So he was in the bed, talking to me, discussing. I said, yeah, don't mind, I will be lying in the bed and talking to you. And sometimes dictating, and then giving finishing touches to the chapters, etc. I said, sir, why don't you take rest? Then we seek extension of 1 week, and heavens are not going to fall. He said, GR, commitment is a commitment. Come what may, let's send the manuscript by such and such date. So we work day and night, and that's how.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So I leave the difficult task of introducing the book to my lead author and guru, Sri YV Reddy.
Thank you. So, Dr. Reddy, one of the themes of this book is that Indian fiscal federalism is at a crossroads. And Bunty also in her opening remarks mentioned what's happened over the past about 4 or 5 years, which is the Planning Commission was wound down, the 14th Finance Commission, which you headed, gave its recommendations. We shifted to GST, then this entire distinction between planned and non-planned expenditure was removed. So going forward, means what, when you say that India's fiscal federalism at a crossroads, what exactly do you mean, and what is the importance of being at that crossroad? No,
Thank you. Thank you. Is it audible? Thank you very much. Before I answer your question, I should read out my prepared answer, I suppose. So, at the outset, I must thank the governor for taking time off and coming over here. And it's very, very kind of you, sir. And he referred to continuity and change also. Very, very apt, and I agree. But interestingly, Indian Fiscal Federalism also believes in that. If you see the vertical balance in the last 70 years, every successive finance commission, whatever it changed, it did not change the share of the center or states by more than 10%, including the 14th Finance Commission. The 32-42, actually, if you include the plan expenditures, the plan revenue expenditures, which are separated out artificially before, if you bring that back in and bring back the sessions, that is 39 to 42. So now every finance commission changed incrementally. So you have some continuity, some change. Similarly, in the formula also, there are some changes, but there is underlying. Similarly, with regard to horizontal balance, because this, I thought I should explain and confirm my thesis of continuity and change is not just my own. It is in the management of the Indian economy in all its dimensions. In horizontal balance also, yes, but always, any state, it loses or gains by not more than 10%. By every finance commission. Tamil Nadu loses, but loses 10%, 5%, 3%, but never dramatically. I think that's the second characteristic of what I would say again, continuity and change. Now, having said that, I must also say something about continuity change, is that I used to have state finance secretaries conference. I think the present governor is continuing that. Yesterday there was state finance secretaries conference. But there is also a change. During my 5 years, I never reduced interest rates. So these things keep happening, continuity and change, in different combinations. Now, but I must also say, in terms of personalities, and coming from IAS, I can be very frank about IAS officers. The others can't afford to, you know. So generally we say there are two types of IAS officers. You go to some IAS officers in the finance department, the fellow says no. Even then you come out and say, oh, it's okay, you're pleasant. This type. The others, the others, where you go, you talk to them, he says yes, and even then you're unhappy. Because the way he says yes. So I think that's another good thing that we have in the present governor. There is something else also I must share with you. That is, there are three types of senior functionaries in government. So there are people who have open doors and closed mind. And others who have open doors and open minds, very rare category. And of course, closed door and closed minds also have been there. But that's not confined to IAS, if I may say so. But having said this, I must now, I suppose, again, sorry for taking time, but I thought I must introduce some humor. I know, because I think 80% of the people have come out of affection for me. But still, I suppose, while thanking Oxford University Press, I may also do some marketing for them. But I'll put it differently, partly answering your question as desired by Dr. GR Reddy. Why this book? And what is different about this book? See, first thing I would say is it is comprehensive. It takes account of not only Finance Commission and Planning Commission, or rather non-Finance Commission transfers. You see, actually, if you take this fiscal federalism deals with intergovernmental transfers. In the intergovernmental transfers, only 2/3 is on account of Finance Commission, 1/3 is on account of non-Finance Commission. But in the two-third, 80% is only tax devolution. Tax devolution is sharing of taxes. They're just two different things. It's not devolution in that sense. So therefore, in reality, we are talking of only one-third, or even less than one-third, coming from Finance Commission. Two-third is coming from non-Finance Commission, whether it's Planning Commission or Niti Aayog or something else. So in a way, therefore, in the intergovernmental transfers, the real problem is not the Finance Commission transfers. The real problem is the transfers outside the Finance Commission. And I think that should be and all through the whole issue of institutional arrangements, etc., that discussion came about in the context of non-Finance Commission. So therefore, this book, I would recommend for those who want to take a comprehensive view of the intergovernmental. Second is a little more of state's point of view. I think a lot has been written by those who have not worked in either places, or by those who have worked only in the central government. The third thing is that historical account, which we also did. And finally, the recent developments, which you mentioned, and that's where the crossroads come in. Because GST is the game changer. 14th Finance Commission, people think it's a game changer. I don't know. And then 15th Commission may be a rechanger or something like that. So, but the fact is that things are happening. And in between, Plan Commission disappeared. And then you don't know the distinction, what was planned, non-planned. So many things have happened, and that's why we are at crossroads. And I think to understand why we are at crossroads, for more detail, please read the book.
Thank you, sir. As always, insight plus wit, that's a classic Dr. Reddy combination. Nilkant, if I can come to you now. You've been one of the people who's been writing a long time about the importance of state budgets. And, we usually look only at central finances, central budgets. And you sort of, at one point of time, were a voice in the wilderness, and now more people are paying attention. So can you just, again, take us through your main argument that why do state finances matter as much as central finances? And also there is this perception that the states tend to be fiscally irresponsible, or the states are particularly prone to capture by populist interests. So if you could speak a bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So, so I kind of stumbled upon the importance of state budgets when I was looking at the employment by governments. I kind of discovered that central government employs 32 lakh people, out of which 14 lakh are in the railways, some 12-13 lakhs in BSF, CISF, Post and Telegraph is 2 lakhs, so basically 4 lakh people work in the central government. But 1.2 crore people work in the state governments. And that set me thinking that, the most of and then when you think about as a business, as an individual, you interact mostly with the state government. The central government doesn't really come into the picture. Now even tax filing is online, thankfully. So, and then when I started looking at, and this was actually immediately in the aftermath of the 14th Finance Commission, and very soon, from about the aggregate spending by state governments from being 6% higher than the center, now it is about 90% higher than the center. And just the state of UP spends 20% as much as the center. And if you look at the center's budget, there's about 10% which is discretionary. So if you remove the interest payment, which is 25-26%, there is salaries, there is defense, there is subsidies. People think are discretionary, they're actually not. So why is there so much of hullabaloo over the budget? I asked once a anchor of a prominent TV channel as to why do you, create so much noise about something which is actually quite useless. And he said, this is the biggest TRP event for the year. But at the same time, states, and you see remarkable diversification. In fact, after the allocations under the 14th Finance Commission actually led to expenditure increases by the states, and this coincided, and I'll address the fiscal slippage issue. This coincided with the end of the 13th Finance Commission. So what had happened, and this is something which very few people seem to know, that when the Finance Commission sets the kind of the deficit targets or the borrowing targets, what happened in the 13th Finance Commission, seems, was that they assumed a certain nominal GDP growth and they set fixed targets. But the nominal GDP growth turned out to be much higher. So as a percentage of GDP, the deficits came out to be much lower. So in FY12, where everyone of the current vintage of economists says, oh my God, states are slipping, they all start in FY12, which was because of the historical issues, was the lowest point in the aggregate fiscal deficit ratio. And now the states have moved up from 1.9 to 2.6. Now, so this happened, so the 14th Finance Commission came, there was an increase in devolution, there was an increase in taxation, the states were doing, the impact of VAT implementation, etc., was leading to tax to GDP increases. And it happened when they were going from 1.9 to 2.6. So as that expenditure increase happened, I think the states themselves were first flustered. So one, again, a journalist told me that she talked to the chief finance minister of a very prominent Indian state. And he said, he has no idea. So, it all starts like that, right? You suddenly get a lot of money. And then over time, you've seen in the last 3-4 years that the states have started to differentiate their spending. So you've seen, for example, Bihar is actually giving explicit subsidies for power. So instead of that implicit SEB deficit, which is actually a fudge, they're giving allocations. UP is hiring 100,000 police people. They need more police people. There are states spending on irrigation. So there is a learning curve. So the condescension that existed earlier, so partly as the book, and I must confess I've not read the whole thing, but in the first few chapters where the history of this is discussed, I also kind of, while writing my own book, which is now, I think, back on the back burner, but the point is, I discovered that the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms were what allocated the powers between the center and the state, and which pretty much then set the caste, the cookie cutter, which led to what we have now. And there was around the Constituent Assembly a fear that we would break apart. And there was this overemphasis of the unity of the country, and therefore the debate around whether it should be a union or a federation of states. We have, I think, come a long way from that. So now I don't think there is any realistic fear of India breaking apart. And this is the right time for the states to be given a lot more freedom and a lot more discretion given the differentiated needs they have. So some states need to spend on education. I mean, just one last point here. Despite the fact that UP and Bihar spend the highest amount as a percentage of GDP on education among all states, the expenditure per student is a fifth of what happens in Kerala. So there is a lot more of, I think, differentiation which is needed among the states, and therefore a lot more devolution and discretion needs to be given to
So
them.
just quickly, the approach of the 14th Finance Commission, which was to increase unconditional transfers, that let the states decide rather than the center deciding what, and plus, of course, the entire parallel issue of centrally sponsored schemes, cutting them down. So you think that actually is working, that states are now using money sensibly according to their own requirements?
I think they are, and this is how democracy is supposed to function. I mean, not in a condescending manner that, my God, these guys are going to be corrupt and irresponsible. You let people decide for themselves, I think is the basic principle. And I don't think the centrally planned schemes have really gone away. I mean, I think it is very hard for the bureaucracy to cede power. They have stuck around in very convoluted ways. So that's, I think, a challenge for the 15th Finance Commission.
So Prachi, among the, of course, the fiscal federalism issue, there is the issue of the vertical allocation, and then there's the horizontal allocation between states. And there's this perpetual debate about how do you balance the equity and the efficiency issues, that you obviously need to send more money to states which are poorer, which need to build public goods, but you should not disincentivize states which are doing better. And against the backdrop of all, sort of the subtext of nationalism, which sometimes breaks out in India about the North versus the South, how do you think Indian fiscal federalism should deal with this issue? And I think when you were the finance ministry, you did some work on weightages also.
So Niranjan, if I may, a lot has already been said. I think I'm also still reading the book, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly so far. Let me try and give some, context. I think if you go back to independence, the country was underdeveloped. There was unequal distribution of income across regions. And clearly an explicit government objective was we need a more egalitarian society and we need balanced development across regions. And it was felt that, look, if we leave things to markets, then probably some sections of the society are likely to benefit more, and it might lead to higher inequality. So active state intervention was envisaged. And that's why I think based on the constitutional mandate, finance commissions are set up every 5 years to look into the issue. And the essential, economics idea is that look, poorer states will get these additional financial resources. They will consume more, they will invest more, and they will catch up with the richer states. And here, let me just put one. I mean, the question I think which we need to think and ponder, especially now that we have this phenomenal book by Dr. Reddy, is 14 finance commissions have happened. Have we achieved that objective? And what different or what new can the 15th Finance Commission do? And a very simple way that I want to gauge or deal with this question is has there been convergence? And this convergence term is not it's fairly common in the economics literature. It goes back many years. So are poorer states catching up? So, I mean, my understanding of the literature, and I'm happy to be corrected, on India is that's not the case. And what I did was something very simple. I looked at state level data. I looked at data from 1995 to 2017. And I just looked at the scatter plot between growth rates in per capita income and lagged per capita income. The relationship is flat. If anything, it's actually upward sloping. That actually states which were richer to begin with, like Punjab, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Delhi, they're actually doing better. So, I have my own theory for why that's the case, but I would love to hear the perspective of the rest of the panel and how should the 15th Finance Commission think about this issue.
No, but